as they say in the vernacular. That's not from the Holy Scripture. If there's only love, and love heals and sets me free, why am I in pain? It takes a long time to get to the bottom of what we call the truth, and to not hold on to a superficial or a simplistic notion of what we're talking about here on Sunday morning. Because in my experience, I have experienced, well, the promise of living being fulfilled in my life when I have been faithful to those promises and done my part. But you know, principle is principle. Order is order. Nature is nature. And I am that and you are that. And things happen. Our experience of living is not always the same as what we affirm the ultimate reality to be. So I have dedicated most of my adult life to closing the gap between what we know and how we live. Now, for me, that gap was as wide as an ocean until 1985, 40 years ago, until 1985. Because I had no understanding that there was a principle and an understanding of what God might be that made sense to my intellectual mind and granted me personal freedom. And now maybe the gap between what I know and what I experience is as vast as, Lake Superior. I don't know. I don't know that I'll get it this close in this lifetime. But my energy and my dedication and my practice and my living and my study and an opportunity to share. Because, ministers know whenever you're talking about something, there's always another track running behind here saying, do you really believe that? And you go, yeah, I really believe that. That all happens in a millionth of a second every time you want to say something. And I don't believe it, I know it. It's been my experience. It's been my experience. So our work through our practice, through our gathering, through our support of each other, and for the monitoring of our own minds, because your conscious mind, its greatest job, or the work of your lifetime, is to stand portal at the gates of your mind in what you will allow in and not allow in. And then if something sneaks out, you have to be the bouncer as well and throw it out, because I know that's not true. There was something that I learned also, and it was fairly recently, and I never heard it put this way exactly. It was in a nonviolent communication workshop. And the trainer said, "You are accountable for what you know." And she made eye contact with me. And I went, "Oh, yeah, you are accountable." And what does it mean to be accountable? Once you know it, you can't pretend you don't. And you have to act accordingly, as skillfully as you can, every single moment of the day, because you cannot sacrifice principle, not for any excuse, not for any person, not for any time, not for any reason. If we do, we suffer. Sometimes just a tiny bit, sometimes it's bad. It's bad. What about things that are not within my control? Being an active participant in several 12-step meetings, as I am, we know the serenity prayer, which is, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, which is everything on planet Earth. Everything. the courage to change the things I can. The only thing I can really change that I am accountable for is changing what I think about my experience. I can change my judgments about you or them. Only thing I can change, and what I must change, what I am accountable for, is having an honest and freedom-giving opinion about all people everywhere, no exceptions. That's hard. There's plenty to be upset about. And for, a good number of us, I'll speak for myself, uh, we have gifts and abilities and capacities that we're not even aware of that they're gifts until we get to a certain age and we start to lose them. And we go, oh my God, did I take that for granted? I still feel like I'm 38, but my knees do not. What happens when things like that come to us? How do I hold that in a reasonable way? How do I not blame myself for stuff that, it really is not. We're not that responsible for everything that happens to us or in the world. We are responsible for our reaction to it and to know what's to do. What do I do next? In my desire to close the gap between what I know and how I live, there have to be a set of practices that allow me to do that. And that's why we have prayer treatment. That's why we continue to go to class. We are a culture of lifelong learners. We are always interested in elevating our consciousness, which is only assuming more and more responsibility for my life and not blaming anybody else for it. And to see things as they really are on planet Earth. To see things as they are. That's not easy. And we don't get support from anywhere except our own fabulous spiritual community. Give a hand for yourselves. We don't get support from anywhere in our culture to live in a way that is gentle, that is effective, that is graceful, that is courageous. When I watch TV on Sunday night, every darn commercial is about a drug that I need to ask my doctor if it's going to be good for me. How sick can I possibly be? It wears you down. It just wears me down. How about a commercial that says, aren't you lucky to be alive? That would work. Yeah, yeah. I have a story that I want to tell you. And because it points to one very elegant and effective tool, one practice that you can use. And for me, it's the beginning of everything all the time. And I do think about this a lot. I know some of us were born in Texas and were raised Presbyterians. I don't know about the rest of all y'all, but I'm not much of a Bible guy, but there are a few stories that are very meaningful because it points to the practice, not the miracle with miracles, but the practice that we can embody. This is the story about the lame man who was at the pool of Bethesda. Do y'all know this story? We got one shore and 36, I don't know. So at the Temple of Solomon in Jerusalem in the year whatever they built it, there was gates, and there was a pool of water out in front of it, because you always had to purify before you went into the Muslims still do this. You have to make your ablutions before you go into the temple or the mosque. There was a legend that outside of this pool, that an angel that could not be seen ever would come down and somehow disturb the water. And the first person who gets in the pool would be healed of their disease. So, of course, there are going to be scores and scores of people living around this pool, hoping to get into the water before anybody else does, so they can be the one who's healed. So rich folks have people with them to help them. Poor folks don't. Very complicated scenario, right? Is anybody from New York or been to Central Park in New York? And there's the fountain, the Bethesda fountain. The Bethesda fountain is an angel with water coming out of it. And it's about this story, because I'm looking at Lisa because she knows New York. So the story is that the fountain, I'm a New Yorker. I have pride in these things. The story is the celebration of the aqueduct in 1843, because it brought in clean water, which promoted an enormous change in public health right away. So it was the most important healing thing that happened in New York City since it had been founded. So anyway, this is a very short story. It's only this long, but it's the second most important piece in the whole Bible. After there's a feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. And now there is at Jerusalem by the sheep market a pool, which in Hebrew is called Bethesda, having 5 porches. In these lay a great multitude of impotent folk, of blind, halt, withered, waiting for the moving of the water. For an angel went down at a certain season into the pool, troubled the water. Whosoever then, after the troubling of the water, stepped in, was made whole of whatever disease he had. And there was a certain man there, which had an infirmary for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lie there, and knew that he had been there now for a long time, he said unto him, Wilt thou be made whole? Wilt thou be made whole? The impotent man answered him, Sir, I have no man when the water is troubled to put me into the pool, but while I'm coming, another steppeth down before me. Jesus said unto him, Rise, take up thy bed, and walk. And immediately the man was made whole, and took up his bed, and walked. And on the same day was the Sabbath. There's more about that. The deep meaning of this particular story is to the practice that it points to. Now, I don't know if you know this or not, but no rabbi will ever tell you that Moses was a real person. Every Jew knows that. Moses was an energy, an archetypal energy that gets you unstuck from one place to a sense of freedom. It's a warrior energy in every one of us. And every Jew knows that. And, Jews think it's fairly hilarious that we think that Jesus was a real person. Maybe he was. I happen to think he was. But the notion of Christedness is always to be interpreted as that in you that knows what's real. No matter what your excuses, your own wholeness, your own sense of Christedness, your own sense of completeness and of deep knowing, it knows the truth and cannot be discouraged. It is a part of our consciousness If you want to call it your soul, you can. You can call it, it doesn't matter which you call it. But there is something in you that always knows the answer, that always knows the way out. Even when we become practitioners, I learned to always respond to people when they say, I don't know what to do, to say, there's something in you that does. Did anybody else have that training? Of course, there's something in you that knows. The me that's dealing with all this craziness in my life right now is maybe just kind of all up and I can't figure it out. But there's something somewhere that's a part of my being that does know. Be still and know that I am God, which I am. That I am. I can only be I am. It can't be you am. And Yahweh gives that teaching to Moses, the energy that gets you unstuck. Stop your complaining. Know that you have the power to be, you are the primary creative energy in your own life. Get at it. Stay in Israel and be a slave or walk. You choose. As the poet says, tell me, what will you do with your one wild and precious life? Well, I'm guaranteed one meal a day over here and I'll be beaten for it, but I'll take it. No, don't. Ask for more. It is a wild and precious life. Okay. That in you that knows what to do is available to us whenever we choose. And when we find ourselves hobbled, burdened, ill, broke, whatever, when we find ourselves, we are accountable for turning to that which we know knows and say, I am not getting this. I am not getting this. What is it I'm supposed to do? Now, this little story models perfect human behavior because Jesus comes up and makes this guy an extravagant offer after living outside, like unfortunately we see out unhoused people now, living outside for 38 years with the hope of getting better. And he says, will you be made whole? And this poor schmuck doesn't have the common sense to say, thank you, yes. He's got an excuse. Isn't that cute? Now I'm thinking about, like the 60s, 70s, and half of the 80s of my own adult life. You want to do such and such? Well, I can't. I have responsibilities. I'm supposed to, whatever. I mean, how many times in real life, Jesus would probably have to go up to this guy a bunch of times until he got it right. Would you be made whole? Well, I don't have anybody to help me. Thank you for not answering the question. Let's do this again. Would you be made whole? Well, I've been here 38 years. I'm so tired all the time. There's nothing I can really do about this. Thank you for not answering the question. Would you be made whole? And the guy never gets there. I spent a decade doing that. I had a good reason. I had a good excuse. There are things I couldn't do because my partner had AIDS. Okay, that was 15 years. Was it a time of love and enrichment? Oh, hell yes. But I'm not kidding myself to say, no, I couldn't move on with my life. It was too hard. I'd have a job. There's a lot going on in the world right now. And it's tough. that every darn one of you, except the one or two that are just too young to have this conversation, could be you, could be Gene. You know, they touch my Social Security. Okay, what are you going to do about it? Well, somebody needs to do something about it. What are you going to do about it? Well, it's not my job to do anything about it. Same damn story, day after day, year after year, millennia after millennia. The question is, the practice is the closing of the gap between what I know and how I'm experiencing my life right this very second, is to turn to the thing in me that has an answer, that has courage, that has bravery, or is wise enough to ask the right question of myself, which is, how do I continue to assume responsibility, 100% responsibility for my own life? How do I manage my resources as best I can? And is there something for me to do? Is there an action step for me to do that if I'm truly deeply upset, as many of us are, about certain things, what is the courageous, healing energy that I can put into the world as a solution rather than as a complaint? Would I be made whole? Yes, thank you. That is your best spiritual practice for any time, any situation, any circumstance, is to stop that which is, I was going to say, merely human. It's pretty spectacular to get to be a human being. This is a pretty amazing planetary experience to have. But to stop and say, can I do anything about this? No. What, do I have the courage to change the things I can? Yeah, my thought about it, or my demonizing anybody for anything. And in the pause, in the spaciousness that unfolds in that moment, to ask myself, what's mine to do? Really and truly, what is mine to do? You need to rebalance your IRA investments, then rebalance them. Do what you can. Do what you can. And then, you know, the other great spiritual practice, which is difficult, but you remember that corny song, Don't Worry, Be Happy? Don't worry, be happy. That is a teaching from, you know, Charles? Sai Baba, Maya Baba. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. From Meyer Baba. And the whole teaching is, when you have done all you can do, don't worry, be happy. You see, in our desire to have life be magically easy, we always let ourselves off the hook for our personal responsibility, even in a pop song. Don't worry, be happy. That's all you have to do. You just have to let it go. Anybody ever says just, it's always the wrong word. Unless it's the nick of time or fairness, just is always resisting reality. Just get over it. You really? Just do it. Why? Because you're a couch potato and all you want to do is eat Fritos and watch football games. What do you mean just do it? Just say no. Oh, right. Yeah, thanks, Nancy. It's that easy. Just say no. Right? When you have done all you can do, don't worry, be happy. And happiness comes when we know that we have done what is ours to do, and we have assumed responsibility, and we're in right relationship. A, with our creative energies, B, with ourselves, and C, with our community. either intimate or global or intergalactic. These tools are so simple, and they are nearly impossible to use when we need them, which for me is about every 11 minutes of my life. Always, always, always. But they are there for your use so that you might experience the promise of living. Yes. Let's conclude with a little prayer for a half a minute and know that the privilege of being incarnate on this planet is mostly a gift, and yet it comes with burdens. But when I view my life from the highest point of view possible, I do truly, ultimately feel that whatever price we have to pay for being here is still getting it cheap. This is an experience, life, that will be what I determine it to be. And there is that within me, and there is that without that can help me and assist me in every way that I need when I am honest and true and assume my responsibility and have the courage to change my way of thinking from a merely excuse-burdened way to the way of the enlightened master who knows that all things are possible. I accept that truth because I have experienced it in my life. And I accept that possibility for all people here without exception. And together the people said, and so it is.